Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the fight of the century. In this corner, we have the great state of Texas. And in this corner, we have the Supreme Court. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's get it on! So, Texas is defying the Supreme Court, and a battle is ensuing. Supreme Court, a few days back, made a ruling, 5-4. Sometimes I like to have little rumbles inside the Supreme Court. Anyway, 5-4 decided that the Biden administration, come on over here, the Biden administration could go ahead and let the illegal aliens cross the border into the United States or into Texas from Mexico. And they would use an agency called Homeland Security, which is what the Border Patrol is under now, to facilitate this activity. Well, the state of Texas took offense to this matter and decided to pick a fight with the Supreme Court. And so we're in round one, and the fighting is ensuing. And therefore, and hereby, and whatever other legal word you want to use, we're heading toward a showdown. That's right, folks. Texas is defying the Supreme Court order and has basically told the Supreme Court to go fly a kite. Take a day off, go fly a kite, and just don't worry about what we're doing down here in Texas. Because, well, I'm not in Texas, I'm in North Carolina, but you get what I'm saying. They're down there in Texas. So, anyway, so Texas is saying, we ain't doing what you say in Supreme Court. Well, the whole country knows that that decision is unconstitutional. The whole country knows that the Biden administration letting folk come on over, inviting them into a Texas barbecue from Mexico without proper papers is unconstitutional. Anybody ever read the Constitution? I got the Constitution. Look at here. I want to show you this. That there is Constitution. Now let me tell you a little story. And then we'll talk about what could be the end results of this battle between Texas and the Supreme Court. It could be quite serious. But I'm in Texas corner. I'm rooting for Texas. So there was two different factions. One was a democracy, and the other was a constitutional republic. Well, in the democracy, there was 3 wolves and a lamb. And on one day in the democracy, those 3 wolves and lamb got together and took a vote. And they were voting for, what they were going to have for dinner that night. And the 3 wolves outvoted the lamb because it's democracy and the majority vote wins. That they were going to have barbecued lamb that night for supper. And even though the lamb protested this particular decision, he didn't have any kind of rule of law to protect him. So, barbecued lamb it was. Now, the other faction over here, the Constitutional Republic, they got hungry and one night took the same vote, what they're going to have for dinner. And so the 3 wolves said, you know what? Barbecued lamb sounds awful good tonight. So what did the lamb do? He went and hired him a bunch of lawyers, and he went after the wolves. Because you see, in the Constitutional Republic, there was a rule of law, not majority rule. And so the law said that the wolves couldn't have barbecued lamb for supper. So the lawyers came in and said, you wolves, you're going to have to go to Chick-fil-A because you can't have lamb. So anyway, that's the difference between a constitutional republic and a majority rule. Well, even if it's a majority rule in the Supreme Court, if they are obviously making a decision that is unconstitutional, immoral, illegal, kind of like, I don't know, the Dred Scott case just before the Civil War occurred. Strange how history has parallels, how it continually repeats itself, well, to some degree. Anyway, so the Supreme Court made a decision that people could illegally cross into Texas from Mexico, and there ain't nothing that the Texans could do about it. So there. But the Texans, being Texans the way they are, they say, we like barbecue down here in Texas. Matter of fact, barbecue is a delicatessen in Texas. So we having barbecue tonight. But we still honor the law. You see, the reason we could have barbecue tonight in Texas is because those other guys violated the law, not us. We ain't going to violate the law. We're going to stop people from crossing the border, and we don't care what them other nine folks over there in the federal government in that big fancy building have to say about it, because, well, we're Texas, and we do whatever the heck we want. Well, to some degree. Anyway, so Texas is still sending National Guard down to the border, and they're still sending law enforcement down to the border, and they're still setting up barbed wire, Constantine wire, and they're still blocking access into Texas from Mexico. Because the governor of Texas says, you know what? I have a constitutional right to declare that an invasion of Texas. And in the 10th Amendment under the Constitution, Texas has the right to defend itself from an invasion. And we don't even have to wait for the other 49 states and the federal government to declare a war. We can just do it ourselves because the Constitution says we can do that. So they went and done that. So they're basically at war with the people crossing into Texas from Mexico. Isn't that interesting? Now, interesting parallels between, the late 1850s, just before the Civil War hit, I think, 1861? Bull Run was the first battle of the Civil War. And today, a Supreme Court decision caused a state to defy the Supreme Court. Dred Scott was the one in the 1800s. And South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union and say, we ain't doing that. So we're just going to secede and form our own little nation. Well, the president, Lincoln at the time, didn't really care too much for that. Neither did the Supreme Court. Neither did the legislature, even though they pulled their representatives out of the legislature. So what happened is a bunch of other states decided, you know what, we don't like this either. We don't like them telling us how to run our business. And besides, the tariffs that they're putting on the South is really hurting the South financially and economically. They ain't doing that to the North, who's industrial. They're only doing that to the South, who's agricultural. Well, that ain't fair. So a bunch of them decided to leave, including Texas and my home state of Tennessee. So what did we have? Well, we had a civil war. And they're coming out with a movie this year called Civil War. They're going to be showing it in the theaters. Is that predictive programming? Well, the point is, The same road that they went down in the 1800s to get to the Civil War, we're starting to go down now. And does that mean that we're going to end up in another civil war? And if we did, what would that look like? Oh, I'll leave that one up to y'all to decide. But the fact is, history is starting to repeat itself. Now, not only that, but Texas got the support not only of the Texans, but they got the support of the truckers. Because there's a big trucker convoy heading down to Texas, and they're going to get down to business because they're going to go down there and hold them a big trucker convoy protest. And basically tell the Supreme Court, we don't like your decision, go fly a kite. Because, see, we believe in the Constitution, and we believe in the rule of law. And we sometimes wonder, Supreme Court, if you believe in the Constitution. But anyway, they can spell bureaucracy. But some of them agencies in the federal government, they ain't ever heard of no Constitution. So anyway, but the rest of the country has, the states have, and they know what it is. Matter of fact, they can point it out. I got a copy right down here. So, this is the battle that is heated up, and we're in, like I said, ding, round one, Texas versus the Supreme Court. It's going to be interesting to see how this goes. But how do you hold the Supreme Court accountable? Because they seem to, I think, why they call them the Supremes, right? We're not talking about the singing group in the 60s. How do you hold the Supreme Court accountable? The only ones that can hold the Supreme Court accountable are the people. If the people in the South in the 1800s rose up, if the people in the nation rose up and said, we don't like this Dred Scott decision, and we're not going to obey it, and we're not going to abide by it. How long do you think it would take the Supreme Court to reverse that decision? And even if they didn't, that decision would have no power. It would have no power over the people. If the people are not going to abide by it, the Supreme Court don't have an army, they don't have a navy, they don't have an air force, they don't have a space force, they don't have a Marine Corps, they have nothing. They're just 9 people with robes sitting up on the big bench. They have no means of enforcing the decision unless the commander-in-chief decides, well, I got the Supreme Court's backing on this. I think I can just go ahead and send in an army and put a stop to this, because I think that is an insurrection against the United States of America, or at least against me and my administration. So, where are we going to end up with this? Is this going to hit a point to where the Biden administration says, we're declaring martial law in Texas and we're sending troops? Boy, that would be a battle. And how many troops would actually obey the Biden administration in that? And how many of them would say, we ain't doing it? So you might have a schism inside of the U.S. military if something like that were to happen. So this development is very, very interesting to me. Now, it may go absolutely nowhere. It might just all blow over and nothing happen. It really depends upon how each side responds to each other. So the Supreme Court made their decision, and Texas threw down the gauntlet and said, really? You think so? Make me. And the country, the people said, go Texas! And of course, the Vegas goes wild with the betting. Texas 10-1. But anyway, so that is happening. Well, what else? I was going to get a little bit into philosophy and talk about how the idea that there is no God it leaves you where you cannot determine truth. But we'll do that in another video because that's kind of long and kind of involved in logic and philosophy and all of that. So I don't want to mix that with this video. So I've just made a decision. I made a command decision. I made an executive decision. I'm not going to do that. So let's just suffice it there. Keep your eye on Texas. Keep your eye on what the Biden administration does, because this thing could get very, very interesting, and it could affect the country. In Arizona, who's also having a problem with the same problem that Texas is having, and Katie Hobbs is doing the same thing that Governor Abbott is doing in Texas, basically saying, the Border Patrol, we're going to secure our border for Arizona. It's affecting our citizens too much. And Katie Hobbs was getting a lot of heat from her citizens to secure the border. So it looks like the states, California, they're in like a different galaxy somewhere, but at least Arizona and Texas are saying our states are being negatively affected here. It's bringing in an invasion into our states. We know that there are sleeper cells coming across the border. We know there are terrorists coming across the border and so forth. And we consider this to be an invasion of our state. And under the 10th Amendment, we have the right to protect ourselves from such an invasion. And so this could end up being quite the fight. So we'll have more later on the C-Files. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.